Well, happy Saturday, folks. The real Captain Kirk here. We're live from One Bethlehem Plaza here on the last weekend of June, 28th here today. Again, foggy morning here today. Hoping the sun will break out this afternoon at about 59 this morning. Going to hopefully go up to 85 with some sun and then probably get some thunderstorms. Amazing how the weather went. We went from a 4-day heat wave here of 98, and then yesterday here, Friday, it was 68 degrees for a high. That's the coldest in over 40 years. So it went from scorching hot to almost felt cold yesterday. Hit 68 after the major heat wave. Thought we'd look at the ocean temperatures here, kind of in an ENSO neutral phase here. Again, models left. CFS version 2 model here, again, kind of going wacko, trying to predict another La Niña event. But the IRI models all suggest neutral. We kind of lean neutral. And the one way we know that is just meaning no El Nino, La Niña. Just the waters are kind of typical, average. And we could just look at the subsurface. So this is a cross section across the Equatorial Pacific here, going from all the way from west of Australia to Ecuador. And again, so looking several hundred meters below the surface here. And what we see is generally above average temperatures, both in the east or central Pacific. So again, leaning toward again, neutral phase. And we'll have to see here. Maybe 2026 could get into a weak El Nino type phase. Looking at dry to drought phases here across the U.S. here, again, about 49% of the country is in dry to drought phases. It's expanding from last year. It's expanding into the west, the plains, northern plains, northwest. So again, average this time of year would be about 46% of the country in dry area, so just a little bit above average. Again, I think the theme is going to be this will expand generally in the western half of the country. Looking at the cases of wildfires now, this is not acres burned, but just number of cases. Again, there's a lot of little fires out there, but right now a number of fires are actually the most over 10 years, 32% above average. Wholesale change from last year. Again, last year was near historic lows in the U.S. Again, so about 114% more wildfires right now than we had this time last year. And that'll be a theme in the West. Unfortunately, we think a lot of activity here for the summer, fall season. Looking at severe weather ending on the 26th here in June. Tornadoes generally still the most in 14 years, hail down a bit, and winds the most in 14 years. So still on a pretty active pace here for severe weather. And we look at this weekend here, it's going to be up in the upper plains, upper Midwest, and then kind of maybe diminishing a bit as we go through early next week. If we look at the hot 90-degree days, again, obviously we had a major heat wave across the eastern half of the country here. But again, year-to-date, we're U.S. Still down 9% versus last year. Northeast made up a ton of ground. Remember, we were up until this heat wave, we were the fewest 90-degree days in over 22 years, down 81% versus a year ago. Right now, we're down about 26%. So we made up a lot of ground here compared to just a week ago, when again, least in 22 years. We look at the next 2-week here forecast again through to the 12th of July. Not much. Again, U.S. still down about 15% over the next 2 weeks. Now this is just the next 2 weeks, so least in 4 years. Next 2 weeks, the Northeast down about 77% versus last year, least in 10 years. So the heat wave for now in the Northeast is over. Look at the last week world summer here, ending the 28th of June here, the last full week of June. Even though we had all that heat in the Northeast last week, it was still 1.6 cooler than last year, 6th warmest in 40 years nationally. Hot 90-degree days, actually, because of the heat wave, were actually up 3% and the number one most in over 40 years for the U.S. 15% drier, driest in 3 years, 16 driest in 40 years. So generally, I'd say that these companies like air conditioners could say, hey, wow, our sales were kind of flat or even down a bit because it was so scorching hot a year ago when we had a 7-day heat wave versus this year's 4 to 5 day heat wave. So again, that's how we look at these year-on-year trends to kind of quantify the lift or decline in seasonal sales. Really hot there in the UK and Europe. Again, second and fourth warmest in over 40 years. Maps inset left are the trends versus average. Big map here is the trends versus a year ago, how our retail customers look at the weather. Look at this week here, again, the week of 4th of July here, going through the 5th. About 0.4 cooler than last year, coolest in 4 years, 12th warmest in 40 years, so above average national temperature, but again, coolest in 4 years. Hot 90-degree days finally are down a bit, 14% versus last year, least in 9 years for this week. We'll take it, again, after the scorching heat wave. 40-year precip trends, again, down about 12%, driest in 3 years, again, but a lot of spotty thunderstorm activity can certainly lead to some heavier rainfall. We'll look at the 4th of July weekend just itself here. So this is the 4-day period, so Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 4-day holiday here. Actually, national temperature is 2.6 cooler than last year, coolest in 10 years, and 20th coolest in 40 years. So about average nationally, but generally Northeast is seasonal to cool and very cool there actually across the west, the southwest. Again, we'll even get a little bit of rain. Hot 90-degree days, again, least in 10 years, and rainfall down about 10%, least in 4 years. So not too terrible, but again, definitely not the scorching heat that we just came through. Looking at next week here, getting into early mid-July, 6th through the 12th July period, starts what are called the dog days of summer. About 2 degrees cooler than last year, still ninth warmest in 40 years, but cooler trends. 90-degree days, again, down to about 17% nationally, and 40-year precip trends up about 2%, 16th wettest in 40 years. Getting some rain there in the Illinois area where they need it for their crops. So again, they'll take it, again, with the crops in the ground. Look at the world 2-week aggregate. Now, again, we're entering to some extent, hots and colds, but the real hot spots are going to be there in Europe, expanding heat in China. If you're picking a really, really hot spot in the U.S., you're going to say more toward the Pacific Northwest and maybe the Southeast Mid-Atlantic. Again, warm, probably not anywhere near as warm as we just had, and pretty hot there across by Alaska standards. And again, pretty much warm across most of Canada, cooler in eastern Canada. Rainfall trends here again show generally above average rainfall across the U.S. Pockets of some dry, and again, pretty dry across Europe. So, folks, have a great week ahead here, and we will talk to you again this time next week.